What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be showing y'all how to do ball joint eliminators on this 2017 Jeep JK. I like to start by removing the brake caliper and rotor first. Get that out of the way. Go through here and cut all these zip ties where they zip tied the speed sensor to the brake caliper, brake line. Turn that out of your way so you can get to the bolts better. Get this out of the way, it's got to come off anyway. I like to do this with a breaker bar. Just go ahead and break these loose. And your brake caliper up out of the way. You don't want it to fall and potentially stretch or damage the hose. Move your rotor. Sometimes you might have to put a little lube around there. Some WD-40, PB Blast, or whatever you like to use. Let it set. Maybe tap on it a little bit with a hammer to break the rust free. Sometimes they'll rust right to the wheel bearing. Once you got your brakes off, you can turn this back around. Remove your hairpin. In this particular Jeep, they have aftermarket steering, so your nut size right here might be different. I can't remember what it is on a regular JK. Tap on this just a little bit. Drop your drag link out of the way. Tie rod. Go ahead and get your ABS sensor out of the way, wire out of the way. I like to remove the sensor out of the wheel bearing. Seems a little easier for me. You can unclip it up there if you want to and unplug it. Sometimes you have to go through the engine bay to get to them. You'll need a 13mm 12-point socket to get your... I like to pull the wheel bearing with the axle. You can pull it all out as one assembly. You don't have to do that. It just saves having to take this nut back off right here. And it always seems a little easier for me because the axle has to come out anyway to get the knuckle off. So, just loosen all these. I've already done the other side, and someone has, whenever they had replaced the wheel bearings, they anti-seized these bolts, which is good. Just make sure if you use anti-seize on one of these bolts to torque it back correctly. Once you get you can wiggle it. Once you get the bolts out, you can wiggle it a little bit. It should slide out. Sometimes they're really stuck. There's several different ways you can get that out. Some of them take a lot of force and a BFH, and then you wind up having to replace your wheel bearing anyway, but not on this one. Once you get it a little loose, move the plate around a little bit, pull this sensor out, make sure you put it up out of the way. Usually they have grease on it, and sometimes they have shims underneath between this flange right here and the wheel bearing surface. Don't lose those. And you can slide your axle out with it all in one assembly. Makes it a lot easier that way. Then you're going to pull the hairpins or cotter pins or whatever you like to call them out of your castle nuts for the ball joints. The upper and lower on this one have it. Sometimes I've seen where some of the aftermarket lower ball joints don't have the cotter pins. They have a big giant lock nut. Like nylon nut with a nylon sleeve inside of it. Then you can remove your factory ball joint nuts. I grabbed the right one that time. Yeah. The top of here is a 7/8. Make sure you put this wire holder back, because if you don't, you gotta take things back apart again, and it's a pain. Been there, done that. The bottom nut here is 1 1/8 inches. I like to unscrew it a little bit. Maybe leave it at 2 or 3 threads on there. Take a hammer. Tap it a little bit. If you don't leave that nut on there, sometimes if you're holding it and it comes down, you smash your fingers. It's not that fun. Now you need a ball joint press kit. We have a Matco version here, but you can rent. Your local parts store usually has a set you can rent. That'll work good enough. I take the upper one out first and pull this off. Get your ball joint press set up. You always wind up using different parts and pieces out of this thing depending on these kits. So you just got to figure out which parts work best for you. Ours has a lot of these kits are different too, so you really... Alright, got all the pieces figured out. Getting in one of them. Wound up using a piece of pipe because our kit doesn't have a good enough piece to go in there to push that out. A big hollow cup with the plate on top of it. All these kits are different. Sometimes if it's sticking a little bit, you can tap right in here, it'll break it free. Might have to go back and forth a little bit. That's what I did. I thought this piece of pipe was going to work. It worked on the other side. That popping's just the ball joint pushing out. Alrighty, it's coming out. See. I do not know what's going on here. This one's a little more rusted in than the other side. That's what I was saying. Sometimes you just got to use whatever you can with these things. Ball joints out. Bottom one's usually a little bit easier. Got a cup with a hole in it that pins onto this to the clamp itself, to the press itself. And then just push straight out on the back of on the top of the ball joint. Socket stuck. Usually it's already shot out by now. And everything likes to hit the floor. There it goes. Then what you want to do, clean this up, just any rust, surface rust or corrosion, whatever, road grime, dirt, whatever gets in there. When you work on one of these that goes wheeling a lot, makes a lot of this stuff about 1,000 times more difficult. I like to use one of these flat discs on a drill. You're not trying to remove any material from the inner knuckle or C, whatever you want to call it. Just get the rust and corrosion off. Once you have them all cleaned, then you can start your reassembly. Alright, so these are your ball joint deletes. The upper one is knurled and larger in diameter than the top, or than the bottom. Has a bolt tapered so it can go into the knuckle. A shim, they call it a shim, and then there is a O-ring in here which can come out. Yeah, make sure that goes back in there. Whenever you put it in. So start by removing the bolts from the ball joint. The lower nut on the bottom, nut on the top, the top nut, and then there's another shim, they call it. I would call it a washer, but, and then another O-ring. There's actually 2 O-rings in this one. There's another one in there. Start by putting the bottom one in with whatever assembly of parts you can use out of your ball joint kit. I found on the other side that we have cups, like one short cup like this that kind of snaps into the bottom of the press. You set your ball joint eliminator in that, go up, and then you have another cup that doesn't have a hole in it, just to press against, get everything lined up. Start pressing it in. You want to make sure that it's not going in crooked, because that could damage it. The other side is very tight going together. Once it stops, stop. Try not to put a lot of pressure on it. They say it could damage the sleeve, which will damage the uniball inside the sleeve. Take a look at it. Make sure it's all the way flat against the bottom of the inner knuckle. Your top one, put it in there. And then for this one, I use this piece right there, and then that same cup that I used on the bottom. sure that your flange is pressed tight against the inner knuckle. That should be it for pressing these pieces in. Alright, so we're ready for reassembly. You want to start out by putting your bolts back in, O-ring, top shim, bolt, bottom bolt, O-ring, shim, top nut. Tighten this one hand tight. Says to tighten this one till it bottoms out. It's hard to do that without the knuckle being on. Go ahead and start your nuts. The upper's a 9/16. I think they said the bottom is 5/8. 9/16. No, 5/8. Yeah, 5/8. So they want to see this one torque to 40 foot-pounds. So get your torque wrench, set it to 40. Have to move you guys a little bit. The top is a 3/4. I suggest torquing from the nut side. Just get it tight. All right. That's 40. Then they say to torque this lower one to 50. Foot-pounds. And by they, I mean American Iron Offroad. This is the ball joint delete system by American Iron Offroad. Well, that's not gonna work. That's 50. Tighten this upper nut on the lower ball joint. Works out better if you use the right size socket. I tightened this one to 50 as well, torqued it. Then they say retorque the upper to 50 foot-pounds. Oh, there it is. No. There it is. And then finally, torque your lower nut to 85 foot-pounds. And that should be it. Construction is the reverse of destruction. The way we took it apart, but just put it back together the same way. Be sure to lift and properly support, of course, jack stands. Always use a jack stand. Do not get under a vehicle that has just supported by a jack. I've seen jacks fail over the years, and that's not great. It can really hurt you. And if you have, make sure if you have those crappy Harbor Freight jack stands, don't use those either, because there's been several people hurt by those things. So that'll be it for this one. Just read your instructions, make sure you follow them, and everything should turn out good. Y'all have a good one.